Greetings, Dr. Mark Winton here from the Department of Criminal Justice at the University of Central Florida, here in beautiful Orlando, Florida. And what I'd like to discuss in this video is forensic genetic genealogy. I wanted to first let you know that some of the material that I'm using in this presentation comes from an excellent article that has been very helpful by Dr. Claire Glynn, Bridging Disciplines to Form a New One, The Emergence of Forensic Genetic Genealogy, in the 2022 issue of the journal Genes. So that's been very, very helpful. So let me get into this right away. I'm going to try to briefly go over this, and there's obviously a lot more that I'm not able to cover in this area because of time constraints and simply my lack of knowledge. This is a vast area, and as you'll see. And some of you may already know a lot of this and a lot more than I do about this, and some of you may have not heard too much about this, and some of you may have heard a little bit and then you have a developing interest about this, because I think you're going to see this strategy used, this forensic genetic genealogy used much more frequently now and in the future. So let's get started. So this is another tool for the criminal justice practitioner, and we basically see the merging of genetics and genealogy. So law enforcement professionals, forensic specialists, and genealogists are teaming up to solve cold cases. And one of the popular cases where this method has been successfully used is the Golden State Killer case in 2018. It also looks like this method was used in the Idaho mass murder case that occurred in 2022, where an arrest has already been made, but at the time of this video, we have not had a trial. What is forensic genetic genealogy, or FGG? According to Glynn in the 2022 article, quote, FGG involves searching genetic genealogy databases for individuals that share segments of matching or very similar DNA with an unknown DNA sample and are therefore considered genetically related at some level. And end of quote. Glynn also points out that some of the consumer databases that are commercially available allow the use by law enforcement while others do not. And you would basically have to check the current terms of service of each company. Some have opt-in and opt-out regarding their use in law enforcement. Some of the popular genetic genealogy testing companies we may be familiar with, and again, some may and some may not allow law enforcement to use the databases or may have certain conditions. Anyway, GEDmatch, 23andMe, Ancestry, Family Tree DNA, and MyHeritage. And some of you may have spit into the tube and then sent that tube to one of these companies and got back access to thousands of relatives, from parents to distant cousins. And you may have used this to build out your family tree through multiple generations. And additional data may also be available from these companies, for example, the geographical location of the family members, your ethnicity, and of course contact information to make connections with these matches. One of the nice things about these companies, and this doesn't necessarily relate to forensic genetic genealogy, because you have to look at their terms of service, but if you're using it as a consumer and you have your data, your file from one company, you may be able to upload your file into some of the other companies' databases, just having access to millions of participants who have, contributed their sample of DNA to these commercial companies. So a lot of the genealogical research that goes along with forensic genetic genealogy is very complex, as it has to do with building family trees and identifying relationships. So professional genealogists are often consulted to work along with law enforcement professionals on these cases. Now, Glenn, in the 2022 article, talked about the forensic genetic genealogy, the FGG workflow, and so I'm going to kind of base it on that discussion with some other material I'll add here and there. But first, a forensic sample is obtained from a suspect at the crime scene. I also wanted to mention that this strategy may also be used in cases of unidentified human remains. So a forensic sample is obtained that technology now permits just the tiny sample DNA may be obtained at the crime scene, and it's very difficult for offenders not to leave DNA at a crime scene. And so, of course, that the DNA has to be collected, but also it has to be differentiation of what would be suspects' DNA from victims, and also other people who may visit that site or live at the site, and maybe even investigators as well. So I mean, it's very important to protect the crime scene right away and to avoid contamination. And that sample then is presented to the CODIS system, and that's the FBI's Combined DNA Index System, which contains DNA profiles of known offenders. So they see if there's any matches there. If there is, they pursue that from there. If there are no matches, then the forensic genetic genealogy proceeds to the next step. And that is that a lab prepares a sample and creates a data file that is uploaded into commercial databases that allow for this type of use. And then matches, family matches, are used to construct family trees and search records. And this part is a lot more complex and may take months, and many professionals working on this, and may lead to some possibilities, may lead to the perpetrator and may not. So I don't want you to think that this is simply that they just upload the file of the suspect's DNA, and these family matches come up and they're like, okay, and they have a family tree. Oh, there's the perpetrator right there. No, it's much more complex than that. That the ideal situation would be that they put the perpetrators upload the perpetrator's DNA, and a match comes back with a mother or a father or a sibling or something like that. That's often not the case, and so they end up having thousands of third, fourth, fifth cousins out there. And so that's why you need a professional family genealogist to help out, and not only building family trees, but also then searching records, searching online records, and maybe even searching records that exist in communities or in courthouses, records that haven't been digitized at this point. So a lot of records are online, and some of these commercial genealogy companies provide not only the matching, but they also have research components. So you have access to census data, passenger lists from ships, death certificates, marriages, high school yearbooks, just all kinds of stuff that you connect using, inputting data of names and that and date of birth, date of death, location where they lived or were born. So you can look at all these different aspects there, but hopefully through a match or matches in the database, and also research using publicly available records, a possible perpetrator is identified. But we don't stop there. We don't stop there. Then, and this is very important, a sample must be obtained from the suspect and then compared to the original DNA sample from the crime scene. Now, in the case of the Golden State Killer, you're talking about crimes that were committed years ago. They had DNA. They weren't getting matches in the CODIS system. So they submitted it to one of the commercially available databases that allow law enforcement to, and they did get some matches, and they did create family trees, and so they had a suspect. They were able to determine a suspect. And then after that, what they had to do is get his DNA, and so they got a sample of DNA from his car door when he was going shopping, and from a tissue that he threw out in his trash can. Matched. Arrest, successful prosecution. You can take a look at some of the articles or YouTube videos out on the Golden State Killer. There's a couple books out too. Fascinating stuff. And like I said, some of you may have an interest in, forensic genetic genealogy from criminal justice perspective, from forensic science perspective, or basically genealogy perspective. So it's a fascinating area, and there's ethical issues though we have to consider as well. First of all is privacy. What are the ethical aspects of privacy of using this strategy? And also, how does consent play a role? Like I said, that a company has policy and they'll state what it is. Some companies may not allow law enforcement to use. Some companies may. Other companies may have an opt-in or opt-out. So I mean, it varies. It varies, and that can obviously change. And so, of course, you want to look at the company's policies and whether they adhere to those policies. What happens if the company gets sold? What happens? Are there policies within, related to that? Or we're also trying to catch up with the rules and regulations regarding all this. It's, a lot of times we're a little bit behind. We have a little bit of lag in terms of the technology and the laws. Also, what about the possibility of errors and mistakes? That we have to consider that as well. And then what types of crimes or situations should this be used for? For the most part right now, it's used for cases of homicide, sexual assault, and unidentified remains. Would this branch out even further? I mean, we're going to get to the point where someone breaks in my car. I call up the local police department. I say, someone broke my car. Come get some DNA off the door handle or, the steering wheel. Rule me out, and then see if there's anyone else's DNA. No one's been in my car. Go after him. Put him in the database. Obviously, right now that's not going to happen. But you have to think about how science changes, and will one day that be something? I mean, I don't know. So the complexities become even more given the developments in the science. So this really, this forensic genetic genealogy really kind of took off in 2018. My understanding in several hundred cases have been solved. Cold cases have been solved using forensic genetic genealogy. And as I mentioned, the case in Idaho, we'll see how that plays out. Maybe we'll get some more detailed information how forensic genetic genealogy was used. That would be fascinating to see. As I've mentioned in other videos, I've never been a law enforcement officer before. but I worked in forensic mental health settings, and I worked for an organization that provided assistance to law enforcement agencies, state attorney offices, and the like. Mostly on violent crimes. I worked mostly on sex crimes. And this was a long time ago. And I'm thinking about some cases, for example, missing children cases, things of that nature, sexual assault cases, thinking about how, these strategies might have led to very different outcomes and perhaps a lot more arrests and successful prosecutions in that regard. I don't know. But I think this is something, in my opinion, we're going to see a lot more of this. And I know the Golden State Killer case made it kind of opened our eyes, made it popular to discuss, to talk about it. Really brought this strategy and technique into the public domain. But now the Idaho case, I think we're going to take a closer look at that as well. We have to be very careful with any new strategy, because it hasn't been used that much at this point. So we really need to evaluate all kinds of parameters regarding this. And I know law enforcement agencies that are using this technique, and they haven't had success yet, but people join up all the time, and so and they can keep checking to see there may be a match one day. Friday they check, nothing new. I'm sorry, a better match. Monday they log on, let's just check. All of a sudden, a sibling match comes up. It's like, whoa, that's big. And then they know they have their work cut out as far as collecting a current forensic sample from the suspect, matching that to the crime scene, of course. So this is kind of in the middle. And it'd be interesting to see how this plays out in trials as well, how the state attorney, how the defense attorney, how all this work, the experts coming in there. And I think, studying this from a societal perspective, and then looking at how other countries might use or not use this method, would be very relevant as well. And I'd basically summarize by saying, keep watching this emerge and how it's used. Thank you.